Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. All of our cities and communities should be safe. It doesn't matter whether the communities are led by Democratic or Republican governors or mayors. And as Senator Whitehouse pointed out, there are high crime rates and places where led by Republicans. So all this focus on somehow it's the Democratic-led cities that are more crime-ridden is just full of you know what. And I think we need to get off this kind of politicization of the safety of our cities. Let's just pay attention to what we can do to make sure that our cities are safe, and that means funding the police in appropriate ways. And if I hear one more time that all we Democrats want to defund the police, it's like, you know what? Do you not even listen to any of us who say that is not our position? I mean, is there any understanding of the fact that we are not all in that boat? My God.
You won't believe
Thank
the
you very
heated
much, Mr.
exchange
Chairman.
that happened in this
All of
meeting.
our
It
cities and
started off calm,
communities
but
should
quickly
be
turned
safe. It
into a
doesn't matter
serious
whether
reality check.
the
Let's
communities
break
are
it
led
down
by
step by step.
Democratic or it's just really the word ridiculous comes to mind when people are yelling and screaming about positions that we are not even taking. And as long as we are looking at facts, why don't we? Why don't we look at facts? Why don't we look at how we can truly prevent crime, how we need to train our police? We need to have, I would say, community policing is a good way for our people to trust our police officers, to have a relationship with them. Those are all good things to support. But unfortunately, we have a regime that, for example, the Department of Justice canceled over 800 million in public safety grants, including 100 million in grants for violence prevention. Now, this is the administration that wants to prevent violence, that wants to send National Guard to cities that they politically determine is violence-ridden. Not true, and yet they are making these kinds of cuts. See, the inconsistency is awesome. I have a question for General Enyard. Now, I mentioned that this regime is politicizing our military by sending the National Guard to various cities. And I happen to be the ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Readiness Subcommittee, and I am deeply concerned about the impact of domestic military deployments on force readiness. And every additional deployment has a cascading effort on other missions and limits training opportunities. So for you, General, what impact would you expect on the National Guard's readiness?
If you enjoyed this
Thank you very
breakdown,
much, Mr.
make sure
Chairman.
to like,
All of
share,
our
and
cities
stick
and
around for more
communities
simple
should
and
be
dramatic
safe. It
retellings
doesn't
of
matter
big
whether
political and
the
celebrity
communities
moments.
are led as thousands of troops are deployed around the country for domestic policing. General?
Thank you, Senator. As you point out, every day that a guardsman is deployed in the streets of Los Angeles, or Chicago, or Washington, D.C., is a day that is not spent doing the training that they need to do in order to keep up their military skills, in order to maintain those military skills. If a National Guardsman is walking around Washington, D.C., as I saw four of them walking around last night, or they're picking up trash, or they're spreading compost, those are not military tasks. Those are not the tasks that they need to be trained for in order to defend our nation. And it has a very adverse impact on readiness, as well as an adverse impact on morale, which will directly affect recruiting and retention.
It would be really nice if people could acknowledge that the National Guard has a mission, and it is not to go into cities where, especially where they're not requested to do so, to do policing, and that would have a negative impact, I would think, on their morale. Wouldn't you agree, General?
That is correct. Not only on the soldiers' morale, but let's look at the families. You know, the families are losing their loved one to go off somewhere and stand around taking selfies in front of the Washington Monument. That's not what guardsmen do. It's also an adverse impact on employers, which will directly impact recruiting in the future.
I'm running out of time, but I did want to ask Mr. Jackson, as I came in just as you were getting yelled at by one of my colleagues, but as I mentioned, this regime has cut large amounts in grants that I think would go toward safer communities. So, based on your experience with evidence based community violence intervention, what do you expect to be the impact of these cuts by the Trump regime?
I mean, unfortunately, we know it's going to impact our ability to prevent violence before it happens. When we talk about the historic reductions we're seeing across the country, it's a direct result of investing in violence prevention efforts, but also holding those accountable that are bringing guns into our communities. And both of those are under siege. ETF is being defunded. Victim services have lost $1 billion. Community violence intervention has lost $812 million. Mental health resources have lost $1 billion. So this administration has cut tremendous dollars on both ends, law enforcement and investing in prevention.
And I think there's a direct correlation between violent crime in our communities and very strict gun legislation, gun laws. And Hawaii has one of the lowest violent crime rates because we have very strong gun laws that protect our community. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Webb.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. All our cities and communities should be safe. It doesn't matter if the communities are led by Democratic or Republican governors or mayors. And as Senator Whitehouse said, there are high crime rates in places led by Republicans too. So focusing only on Democratic cities and saying they have more crime is just not true. We need to stop turning the safety of our cities into a political game. Let's focus on what we can actually do to make sure our cities are safe. That means funding the police properly. And if I hear one more time that Democrats want to defund the police, it's like, do you even listen to us when we say that is not our position? Do people not understand that we are not all in that boat? My gosh, it's just really ridiculous when people yell and scream about positions we're not even taking. And if we're looking at facts, then why don't we really look at them? Why don't we focus on how to truly prevent crime? We need to train our police, and I think community policing is a good way to help people trust police officers and build good relationships with them. Those are all good things to support. But sadly, this administration has canceled over $800 million in public safety grants, including $100 million for violence prevention. This is a government that claims it wants to stop violence and sends the National Guard to cities it labels as violent for political reasons, even when that's not true. And at the same time, they are making these kinds of cuts. The inconsistency is unbelievable. I have a question for General Enyard. I mentioned that this administration is using the military for political reasons by sending the National Guard to different cities. I am the ranking member of the Senate Armed Services Readiness Subcommittee, and I'm very worried about how these domestic military deployments affect readiness. Every extra deployment creates problems for other missions and reduces training opportunities. So, General, what impact do you expect on the National Guard's readiness when thousands of troops are sent around the country for domestic policing? Thank you, Senator. As you said, every day that a guardsman is out on the streets of Los Angeles, Chicago, or Washington, D.C. is a day they're not doing the training they need to keep up their military skills. If a National Guardsman is walking around D.C., like I saw 4 of them last night, or picking up trash or spreading compost, those are not military tasks. Those are not the tasks they need to be trained for to defend our nation. This hurts their readiness and their morale, which also affects recruiting and retention. It would be nice if people recognized that the National Guard has a mission, and it's not to do city policing, especially where they weren't even asked to go. That has a negative effect on morale. Don't you agree, General? That is correct. It affects not only the soldiers' morale, but also their families. Their families are losing their loved ones, so they can go stand around and take selfies in front of the Washington Monument. That's not what guardsmen do. It also hurts their employers, which will directly affect future recruiting. I'm running out of time, but I want to ask Mr. Jackson a question. I came in just as you were being yelled at by one of my colleagues. As I mentioned, this administration has cut large amounts of grants that would have helped make communities safer. Based on your experience with evidence-based community violence intervention, what do you think will happen because of these cuts by the Trump administration? Unfortunately, we know it's going to hurt our ability to stop violence before it happens. The big drop in violence across the country is because we invested in violence prevention and held people accountable for bringing guns into communities. But now, both of those efforts are under attack. ATF is being defunded. Victim services have lost $1 billion. Community violence intervention has lost $812 million. Mental health resources have lost $1 billion. This administration has made huge cuts to both law enforcement and prevention. I believe there is a clear connection between violent crime in our communities and strong gun laws. Hawaii, for example, has one of the lowest violent crime rates because we have strong gun laws that protect people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. He explains that a few days ago, Republicans introduced a resolution in the House. It stood against terror, racism, hate, and anti-Semitism. As an American and as a black man, he says he will always support standing against hate, racism, and anti-Semitism, 6 times a week and twice on Sunday. But then, something sneaky happened. At the end of that resolution, they added a line praising law enforcement, which he supports, but also praising ICE. And right now, many Americans have a problem with how ICE is working. He is not happy with their actions and doesn't want to praise them for it. So, he didn't run away from the issue. He talked to his voters, went on social media, and did interviews to explain exactly where he stood. He explained that he stands against hate, racism, and anti-Semitism, but he didn't like that line. That's accountability. He then looks at the secretary and says, when we ask you questions and you avoid giving straight answers, that's not showing the warrior ethos. I'm looking at members of our armed services. They follow your lead. It starts with you. If our troops are out there risking their lives and watching this, and you can't even answer tough questions, what kind of example are you setting? He continues by talking as a prosecutor. He explains that what ICE is doing in California and across the country is dangerous, unconstitutional, and a serious public safety risk. People are wearing masks, pretending to be ICE, and committing crimes, and that's a huge problem. Then he goes back to the point of accountability. He asks, do you believe quality military housing is important? Yes or no? And keep your mic on, because I don't have much time. The secretary replies, our budget supports strong military housing and barracks. He asks, do you think military children deserve a strong education? The secretary says, our budget funds strong education and more choices for military families. He asks again, is it a priority to give reliable care to our veterans? The secretary answers, of course. Mr. Bale then says, Mr. Secretary, here's the problem. Your answers don't match your budget. You said your mission is to bring back this warrior ethos, and the threats we face are serious. But our investments should be serious too. Take the example of the $45 million parade. I can think of $45 million better ways to spend that money on military housing, education for military children, or reliable care for veterans. All of these are more important than a parade. When we talk about showing strength, we're not talking about putting on a show. We're talking about real actions that make our military stronger and keep us safe. So, in my last moments here, I'll say this: accountability matters. This body cares about what the military is doing because we care about national security, and we take it very seriously. The speaker then says, General's time expired.